We'll edit that out later. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Liberty Podcast with me, Darren Eggenschwiler, and him,
Sir Ben Kingsley. Not really. The power of suggestion there. So carry on.
So today we're going to start things off by talking about...
I was going to talk about the fact that we have been voted the best podcast called the Scottish Liberty Podcast in the world ever. And that's official.
Who was allowed to vote in that particular...
Well, there was me. I think Anthony spoke to some people in India who didn't really know what he was talking about, just said yes eventually. So yeah.
Excellent.
We are, so it's me, Tom Laird, and today on the show we have got a fucking show and a half. Jugglers, fire eaters, strippers, you name it. We don't have any of that, but what we do have is I want to speak just a little bit about one of the guys from the great writing partnership that was Galton and Simpson has died. Alan Simpson, and if you haven't seen Steptoe and Son and old episodes of Steptoe and Son, you should, whatever you have to do it, go and watch it. It's fantastic. It was groundbreaking in its time. I believe at one point the Prime Minister Harold Wilson asked Galton and Simpson if they could. This is the days before video recorders, and you couldn't who even remembers video recorders? You couldn't just download it when you wanted to, so you had to actually be there physically in front of the television set if you wanted to see it, and if you missed it, the chances are it wasn't going to come around again for a couple of years. So what Harold Wilson asked Galton and Simpson to do was that if they could postpone their episode of Steptoe and Son for a day or even a couple of hours because it was election day, and he thought if it goes out, far too many people will be in the house watching Steptoe and Son and they won't come out and vote. So, and they did it, they obliged them, they put it out later than normal.
Way.
But if you haven't seen any of Steptoe and Son, watch it. It's great. I think it's probably the start of social realism and comedy. Extremely funny. Not a lot of people know, but Harry H. Corbett, who played the son in it, was kind of Stanislavski school actor. Tipped in his day to be the next Marlon Brando. He was the British Marlon Brando. Great actor stage, and then suddenly got trapped in this comedy series on TV for years and couldn't get out of it, and it was kind of his doom. But brilliant stuff. And if you can, there's I think it was on BBC Four. It occasionally comes up on iPlayer. It's called Steptoe and or The Curse of Steptoe and Son, I think it was called, and it's just about that whole relationship between Wilfred Brambell and Harry H. Corbett, and it's superb stuff. So yeah, sadly.
Was he
Alan Simpson's
87?
Yeah, he was a
nice long life.
Yeah, I guess 87. After it says here a long battle. I hate when they say it's a battle. A long battle with lung disease. His manager has said. So yeah, sadly missed. And if you care, former It girl Tarara Rara Boomdia, Tara Palmer Tompkins. She's died. She's only 45. She's quite a good looking bird in her day, I think. But anyhow. So that's that done with. So we want to move on to the Speaker of the House. Not this house, indeed. But how's this for a fucking glass of water? By the way, this is the kind of glass of water you get when you're in Darren's house. But I was going to say Stephen Bercow, but he's a fucking actor and a director.
John Bercow.
Fuck off, you. Fuck off. John Bercow. It's Bercow, isn't it? Even though it's Bercow.
Bercow, it's spelled.
Yeah. Bercow.
Speaker Bercow. Bercow.
Is he still married to that nutty woman?
I don't know. I didn't even know his
Sally
name.
Bercow. Yeah, Sally Bercow. She usually gets all the attention.
I didn't know, because you only usually see him on that throne in the Commons.
Yeah.
He's actually pretty small.
He is a celebrity short arse.
Yeah, you see him walking next to President Obama, back in the day.
Did President Obama know he was walking beside him? It was just like stalking him.
Well, the description they used was President Obama leads like the little dog around, leads around like a little dog kind of thing.
Right. So what was he showing Obama about the Houses of Parliament or what? Or?
It's something like that, like giving a tour or something like that. So, but Obama was leading the way in the photo they were talking about. So the reason that's interesting is because he was so. Because people are saying that he's like liberal and he's not supposed to be political, and of course he's saying that he isn't going to extend an invitation to Donald Trump to speak to the Commons.
Yeah, which I believe is within his remit to do or not to do. However, it's the what's really boiling the piss or burning the toast, to be more polite.
Burning the proverbial toast.
Yeah, burning the proverbial toast of certain Tory MPs is he's not supposed to make it public. He's not the famous quote from one of the ancient and famous speakers of the House was during the Civil War in England when he was asked to speak. He says, I have no mouth to speak, but that this House gives me leave to do so. Right? So he's not really supposed to stick his oar in. He's only there to moderate
who speaks.
Yeah. So that's what people are getting upset about, the fact that he's done that.
But you disagree? You'd think that he was well within his rights.
No, he's within his rights not to
extend the invitation.
He's got a veto. He can do that. It's generally not done, but he can do it. Same with whoever's in the chair of the House of Lords, if they have one.
Okay.
They do. That he's supposed to issue an invitation. If he doesn't do it, then they don't get an invite. So that it's within their remit to do that. What everybody's upset about is the fact that he made it public and made that statement in the House of Commons.
Politicised it. That
oversteps his remit as far as people's concerned.
Right.
I don't think he's actually I don't know if he's actually broken any rules or whether it's just
distasteful or.
Yeah, it's a convention. Yeah, it's a convention that he's broken,
right? Rather
than a rule, I think. But I'm sure somebody will put a comment there and let us know if I'm talking bollocks. Yeah, the chances are.
If someone knows the laws of the House of Commons.
Okay, what are the laws of the House of Commons regarding the Speaker? If you've got a lot of time in your hands and don't have a girlfriend and there's not an episode of Doctor Who on, or the next season of Star Trek hasn't started yet, you can get down to that and let us know exactly what the situation is there. But yeah, the odd thing is for me, I think hypocrisy abounds in these issues. But they rolled out the red carpet for the Chinese Premier, years ago, and he was perfectly happy. Well, if he wasn't happy, he didn't say so at the time. But the Emir of Kuwait.
I was going to look up what to call him. It was like president. I
think it's the Emir. The Emir of Kuwait.
What would the problem with that be? And what would the problem with inviting
a Chinese premier? Premier? Well, they just don't like Chinese folk. I don't know. If I had to say that China had probably one of the worst human rights records on the face of the planet, would I be close to the mark?
I don't know Chinese history, so I couldn't tell you. But yes, that's certainly the sentiment that people seem to have.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's and they've done a lot of nasty things to the Dalai Lama. Although, in fairness, Tibet, whatever you want to call it, under the Lamas was no picnic either. It was quite a brutal sort of feudal regime. So I don't really. I'm not a big fan of the Dalai Lama either, but needless to say, I know that they crucified a lot of Christians in Tibet and sort of drove nails through their eyes and things like that. So I mean, in fairness, that wasn't under the tenure of that particular Chinese premier, but they still. It's not. It's not a democracy. It's effectively a fascist state. China. It's an autocracy with a capitalist economy.
Right. And Kuwait, presumably the hypocrisy there is that one of the things that the speaker said about Trump is that he was a misogynist, And
did he actually say he was a misogynist?
He literally said racist, misogynist, or he said that the rhetoric being used is racist and misogynist. Like, that's the clip that I heard anyway.
Right. Okay.
So yeah,
well,
when you're talking about,
I don't know what the convention is in that, but I would maybe like Donald Trump to sue him, because I mean, misogyny is quite a. If Donald Trump hated women, why the fuck would he marry one? You know, I don't. You know, or was it just to keep her the slave or whatever? I really don't know. Why would he marry a woman if he hated women that much? I mean, he would just be the first gay president of the United States. Well, there probably gay ones before they just went out of the closet, but yeah.
Or at least he would be someone who doesn't settle with one woman for a long period of time. He wouldn't bother marrying if he hated women.
And he'd be
MGTOW.
Yeah, he has a daughter who's brought into, you know, into his sort of circle of governance. And, you know, that'd be the last thing he would do, surely, if he was a misogynist. But, like John Bercow, like a lot of people on the left, misogyny and racism is just labels they apply to people that they disagree with.
Right.
So I guess everybody's a misogynist and a racist now. I definitely am, because, you know, I disagree with John Bercow and a lot of stuff, so I must be, you know, are you a misogynist? Oh, I get it, yeah, I know what it's because of that locker room thing, because it was like, oh, you grab women by the pussy. If he'd have said, if he was gay and he said he liked grabbing men by the arse, would that have been a problem? I really don't know. I think it was locker room talk. I don't think he's a misogynist. I think he's never said anything that most guys haven't said in his life. I don't know if have I ever grabbed a woman by the pussy? Not with their knowledge anyway. No, I don't know, I jest. He made a joke about sexual assault. Fuck off. Okay, right. So anyway, I don't think he's not a racist, he's not a fascist. He might be a dick, okay? I'm willing to accept that, but he's not a racist or a fascist. There are far worse people than Donald Trump. The guy is a major world statesman. He's making a state visit to the UK. Get fucking over it. You know, I think the whole problem with John Bercow here is the guy that he didn't back won. You know, if Hillary Clinton had been fucking coming to the UK, you know, they'd had her addressing the house and they've been fucking applauding, you know, and she's a cunt, you know, so take that, stick that up your arse, John Bercow. Yeah, I don't really have a problem with the guy usually. I think he seems to be quite a reasonable Speaker of the House.
Yeah, like previously, he was just kind of neutral, I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a bit posh.
Well, but is he really? I don't know.
He just seems a bit posh.
Right, okay.
But that's it. Like, well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Up for Belsill, everybody's posh. Other than me. So, yeah, he's one of these strange guys. I think he came from the moderate right.
Okay.
And sort of drifted more towards the left. I don't know what goes on there.
Be a radical centrist in that case.
Yeah, he must be. With some strange ideas about who is and who isn't a misogynist and a racist.
I mean, it is his house, though, presumably. So
no,
he gets to decide.
Well, it's not his house. Surely it's the people's house.
The people's house.
Yeah.
The common people's house.
He gets to live in it occasionally and get all the cheap booze and stuff like that goes around. Cheap subsidised food. Oh, there's cheap booze. Yeah, the House of Commons bar is one of the cheapest places.
No,
that I'm serious. Like, correct me. We should check this out. But I think I'm right in saying that you can get a pint in the House of Commons bar pretty reasonably, cheaper than anywhere you get it round about.
Give themselves
it's subsidised. I'm sure it's subsidised. Yeah.
Man, that reminds me of one thing that really pissed me off. You know the what's it called? PAT testing for electrical goods.
PAT testing.
Yeah, so you're required to.
Is this thing on? Is that still PAT?
Something like that.
Yeah.
No, it's
right.
So you're supposed to get all electronics goods PAT tested every now and again. I wonder if I can show you.
Is PAT?
What's it?
There is a really lame joke I could make there about Irish people, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to stoop so low.
You kind of did just by...
Yeah, I kind of did just by mentioning. I might as well go the whole hog.
So I wonder if I can trick the camera to... Yeah, close up. There we go. You see this label? There we go. That's been pat tested. So
right.
Every electronic thing needs to be pat tested, apparently, especially like if you're running a business and your insurance... your public liability insurance doesn't cover anything that hasn't been pat tested in the last, there's a specific amount of time.
Okay.
Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is there is one place in the UK which is exempt from those laws. The fucking pat testing office that makes everyone else do it. They made themselves exempt from it.
Yeah, well, this abounds. You've got the Equalities Commission looking at statistics on people's whether or not you've got enough disabled people in your workplace, or whether you've got enough women in your workplace. So of course, they were asked at a Commons committee by Phil Davis, who's a fucking legend in my book, anyway, about how many what the wage gap was in their offices and how many were, and they didn't have the figures at hand, and he did. Phil Davis and read them back. Would it surprise you to know that? And they were terrible apparently. And you go like, well, you're the fucking you're the office that deals with this thing. You're responsible for making sure everybody else is on song, and yet your own office can. So if your own office can't do it, who can? Yeah. So it's a load of bollocks. Government, it's a cancer.
Classic government.
So, Speaker of the House, yeah, we're done with him. Are we?
Norwegian Airlines is something you wanted to talk about.
Well, it kind of links in with Trump, because apparently what's happened is we've got... Well, Trump's one of the things that we disagree with Trump on, there's a lot of things to disagree with Trump on, in case anybody thinks we're sticking up for Trump too much here. He is a bit of a dick in some ways. He goes and does something, I go right on, and then he does something else and I go, that's fucking insane. I think his economic policy's all over the place, and one of the things we disagree with as libertarians is his protectionism. It doesn't work, and historically it's been a pretext to war. However, because he's protectionist, the airline pilots in America, here we go. Again, this is the I newspaper. United States news. Norwegian Air costs US jobs, pilots tell Trump. US pilots are asking Donald Trump to ground low-cost flights from Europe operated by Norwegian. I don't know if you know this flight. I've flown Norwegian. They're pretty much EasyJet with a Scandinavian accent. They're EasyJet with hotter stewardesses. And even stewards.
Sold.
So you're from Norwegian, including the airline's routes from Gatwick to New York, Florida, California, and Las Vegas. Captain Todd Insler. Hi there, I'm Captain Todd Insler. So I sounded a bit piratey there. I'll try that again. I'm Captain Todd Insler. You be flying with me today. Sorry, I'll just leave that. Captain Todd Insler, who chairs a body representing 12,000 United Airlines pilots. 12,000 United Airlines pilots. That's a hell of a lot of pilots. That's just United Airlines.
Yeah, there's a ludicrous number of planes in the air as we speak.
Fuck me with a big stick. Right, okay. Thousands. The thousands of planes fleeing about. So yeah, United Airlines pilots called Norwegian a flag of convenience airline, whatever that means. In a letter to President Trump, he said Barack Obama's decision to allow budget transatlantic flights will destroy our US airline industry and all of the jobs associated with it. Captain Todd claimed the airline's business model undercuts the marketplace and steals US jobs. They took our jobs! They took our fucking jobs!
I never got what that was about, but...
Yeah, it's an episode of South Park. They do a whole skit on it. Yeah, you just check out, if you go on YouTube and check out South Park, they took our jobs. Okay. And it's just a countless amount of people. They took our jobs! And then by the end of it, everybody kind of mishears it. So it's like, they broke his jaw! They took his dog! They took his fucking dog, man! Okay, so we digress.
So just to get us back on track, currently there are 6,000 planes in the air. I checked.
Right at this very moment in time.
Right in this very moment.
And how many of them are United Airlines?
That is a good question.
Mm-hmm. That's why I asked it again.
About. Yeah, no, I have no idea.
Yeah, okay. I thought you were just going to pull a figure out your ass there. It was quite
It was,
funny.
but then I was
you were tempted.
Is that helpful to our viewers? No. And the answer is no, so we'll move on.
Okay. I hope you will boisterously oppose this bad decision. How do you I fucking oppose this decision. How do you boisterously go and get drunk?
They took our planes!
Get drunk, gate crash a fucking congressional meeting and fart and blow an air horn and maybe have some strippers and a mariachi band as well at the same time, and actually could boisterously oppose something. So anyway, he's going to want something to boisterously oppose the bad decision. Bjørn Kjos, or is it Bjørn Kjos, the chief executive of Norwegian, said they are trying to protect their jobs. And we are doing exactly what Trump likes us to do, right? We have a lot of American employees. His airline plans to expand its services between the UK and the US. So, yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I think United Airlines are just trying to protect their own jobs and their own wages. But on the other hand, they're perfectly right within the context that Donald Trump is a protectionist president. So I guess they're just doing, what they have to do. This guy's a protectionist. He's protecting the car industry's jobs. He's protecting the manufacturing industry's jobs, or he says that he's going to do that. So why wouldn't you then protect the airline industry's jobs by saying, if you run a foreign airline into America, you can sod off, frankly, or you can pay tariffs in order to bring your passengers in here if you're competing with an American airline.
So he's consistent across the board.
Yeah, he should.
In his protectionism.
So if at least I think it's insane, but if he was at least consistent on his protectionism.
Why is it insane?
Why is protectionism insane? Because it destroys competition. Why should American workers be denied the right to cheap goods from overseas? Why should American consumers be denied the right to cheap, not a right, but the opportunity to cheap flights and cheap travel from foreign competition? If you're an American, dudes, compete. It's getting easier and easier, I guess, to fly a plane. Much of it is done by computer. And I guess that when it comes to the crunch, and things go horribly wrong, you really need to know what you're doing. But I guess, I guess that it's just getting easier and easier to fly aircraft. So,
and presumably, are oil prices? What have oil prices been doing? Have they been going down? Price of
I don't know, but I'm sure Darren's about to tell us.
Yes, oil price. What's it been doing recently?
Look, I mean, competition's good. Competition's good for everybody all of the time. What you want is that competition to be across the board so that the cost of living for everybody comes down. That's why protectionism isn't good. It sounds good at first. I mean, I used to be into it. I used to go, buy locally. And if you want to do that, I guess you should. If you want to buy local and keep the local guy employed. But how long do you keep that up for? Are you going to reward shoddy service, overpriced services and overpriced goods, inefficiency? How long do you reward that for before you say, do you know what? The stuff that's been made in India is far cheaper, far better quality made, and it lasts longer. That might not be the case, but if it is, why wouldn't you buy it? Why reward the guy who keeps churning out shit products at more expensive prices? Barack Obama bailed out, was it General Motors?
Right.
To the tune of billions of dollars. in order for them to keep making automobiles that nobody wants to friggin' buy, what's the point? It would have been cheaper to give each employee of General Motors $1 million each probably, and just say, go and get a new job, or go and start your own factory building hand-built cars, or start your own business doing whatever, with that $1 million.
Go make rather than that people want.
Yeah, make something that people want to buy at a competitive price. Protectionism causes all sorts of problems, and as libertarians we oppose it. So but if he's going to be consistent in his protectionism, why wouldn't you ban foreign airlines from flying into the United States? Because that is competing with your pilots. I
mean, I spoke on an earlier episode about sort of why I think that some sort of protectionism makes, like, why it makes pragmatic sense, as much as I disagree ideologically. Well, I remember
explain.
Because it was like, because of the trade deficits, because of currency manipulation, they were like, oh right, well, stop currency manipulation.
Yeah, that's a case against currency manipulation.
What I don't get with this one is Norway isn't. I don't think Norway is. I don't think it's much cheaper to live and build a business in Norway than it is in America. So I don't get how this protectionism in this case would be even pragmatic in that sense. This makes.
So what you're saying is there may be pragmatic cases for protectionism, but they don't apply.
They don't apply in this case because if you imagine like clothes making, so to get a room full of people to make a whole bunch of clothes who live in let's say India, it obviously is going to be much easier for them to compete price-wise.
Yeah, I know I like my clothes to be made by 3-year-olds in Bangladesh.
Well, not necessarily 3-year-olds. But yeah, so that makes some sense pragmatically to try and keep jobs in the country, I guess. But it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to get to stop a Norwegian competitor because, presumably there's not going to be... How many airplane companies are competing in America already? Like tons, I suppose. Yeah,
loads. So you've got internal competition, but I guess internal competition's easier to control. You could put in all sorts of regulations to stop that, whereas foreign airlines may not be subject to the same regulations as your own guys.
Ah, right, yeah. So
but then that's a case against regulation, not a case against competition.
So perhaps there are like
for protectionism.
Perhaps there are fuel taxes in America that don't apply in Norway, and that's why there's some form of protectionism. So really, it's really fucking bad because really we want them to have to compete with Norway by removing their air taxes.
Yeah. Well, talking about regulations on airlines and air taxis, I mean, the Scottish Government apparently, if I have the... Again, this is the I.
There was something about them reducing the amount of air tax we pay.
Yeah, well, the headline is "Cut Air Tax to Help Save Tourism." And it says, excuse us while Darren dies. Die in your own time. Podcast time. Thank you very much, sir. Just in case you're wondering, but I'm not going through chemo and I'm not trying to look cool. I'm absolutely Baltic. If you don't live in Scotland, it's absolutely feckin' freezing. My nuts fell off at least half an hour ago, and I'm going to have to find them. They're rolling about the floor here somewhere.
Yikes.
But anyway, cut air tax to help save tourism.
What?
That's tourism. If you're American, not tourism, as George Bush used to call it. We've got to stop tourism. Cutting air passenger duty, APD, if you like, if you prefer the Latin, in Scotland could help save some tourism businesses from closure, a Holyrood committee has been told. Okay.
Some what from closing, sorry?
Save some businesses from closure, tourism businesses from closure. Yeah. Allow me to continue.
Please.
I will. The industry is facing an unprecedented rise in costs Well, I guess one of those rising costs may be the minimum wage going up, but see, unprecedented rising costs with many companies at risk of going under, the Scottish Tourism Alliance, the STA, said. Scottish Government plans to slash air tax by 50% could be part of a rescue package by helping to boost visitor numbers, it added. The reduction will begin when a Scottish replacement to APD is introduced in April 2018, and it will be delivered in full by the end of this Parliament. Ministers hope the move will increase the number of direct flights to and from the country. The STA gave evidence to the Finance Committee on the Air Departure Tax Scotland Bill. There's another piece of legislation that we needed like a feckin' hole in the head. Chairman Stephen Leckie said, the massive uplift in costs for this industry may mean that some businesses in tourism will close. They just can't afford to keep their doors open. It's as blunt and simple as that.
So they're saying that this will add 1 billion to the Scottish economy somehow?
Yeah, apparently. But do you know what? Why is there a tax on air flight to start with?
Well, I immediately assume that this is some sort of green energy virtue signalling.
That, I think, is a big part of it. Now, this is the problem. Now, you've got the Greens and the SNP in alliance.
So they want to reduce the carbon footprint of all of us by taxing us whenever we fly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they don't want to fuck up tourism. So they're reducing the amount of tax. So.
Yeah, this is. I mean, what bugs the utter shite out of me with the Greens is, and you know, and the SNP are kind of like green. There's a love-in going on at the moment with the Greens and the SNP because they've decided that they both want to raise tax across the board. And rob even
SNP,
more people to pay for their fucking idiocy.
And of course, the SNP don't want the Greens stealing their votes. As soon as they come up with something green,
exactly.
We
so
we
there's
think
competition there between the two of them to be greener than.
We always thought of that.
We
We
thought of that first. We were going to do it. We wondered how long it would take you to work that one out. Yeah, but we would see. We've got this paper here that we've already drawn up, you know. So yeah, there's they're doing this white paper thing. But anyway, the Greens chunter on about, you know, how we're all fucking up the planet. Now, look, if you believe in anthropogenic climate change, which I don't, okay, but I have one of the greenest carbon footprints of anybody I know. You know, I don't have a car. I very rarely take public transport. When I do go anywhere, I cycle, not because I think it's an inherently virtuous thing to do, right, but because it's just the cheapest way of getting around for me, you know. And if I don't cycle, energy efficient, and what. However, Echne there, and some people inform me that most bicycles aren't as green as everybody thinks because they've got a steel frame. And it takes a blast furnace to make a steel frame, so there's a lot of carbon emissions there. But anyway, so I cycle around.
God.
Yeah, no, bicycles and carbon emissions shot. So I do a lot of cycling around. If I don't cycle, I walk. And then I can't remember when I last took a taxi. Very rarely, and when I do, it's somebody else that usually pays for it. So I've got a really, and I haven't, you know, very rarely go on holiday because I can't afford to. So I've got a really low carbon footprint compared to some people I know in the Green Party who are always jetting here, there and everywhere, and then they go, yeah, but I carbon offset, right?
What the hell is a carbon offset?
Well, it's like there's loads of these companies out there now making an absolute fortune on carbon offsetting. It was like, so it's like back in medieval times, the Catholic Church would charge people indulgences, right? So if you were going to go and rape and pillage your next door neighbour, right, or you're going to go and rape and pillage the next country,
okay,
you were a king and you're going to commit this atrocity, you would go to the church and you'd say, Father, forgive me for what I am about to do.
Oh, like a prepaid credit card.
Yeah, absolutely. You go, Father, forgive me for I'm about to go and rape and pillage my neighbours. How much will it cost me to be all right in with the big man upstairs, right? And the priest would go, well, you know, we need a church built, we need a cathedral built, we need, we need an orphanage built, we need a nunnery next door so that me and the rest of the lads can go and pump the nuns whenever we felt like it. If you think I'm joking, that kind of stuff went on in the medieval church, maybe even still does. Right, nuns, convents were nothing more than glorified brothels for priests and bishops, So, yeah, okay, that's us lost the Catholic vote. So anyway, where was it? Yeah. So how did we get onto this? Yeah, anyway, so there was this. They had this sin tax. So that you paid money to the church and they forgave you before you went and done something. It was called indulgences, and it was the catalyst for the Reformation. Martin Luther was outraged by this idea that you could
prepay for your
sins.
You
could pay for your sins, and get people out of purgatory at the same time. You pay 60,000 ducats to the church, and it could get one of your relatives who was a complete and utter bastard out of purgatory if you paid off the church. A guy called Friar Tetzel used to travel around Germany saying with these little collection box saying, whenever a coin in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs. So yeah, they made money out of this. Now you've got the modern day equivalent, because nobody's religious anymore, really. Few people on the fringes. But the new religion is basically environmentalism, and what they do is they say, well, if you want to pollute the planet, that's very bad, but you can carbon offset. So you go to a carbon offsetting company and you can pay them money, and they will plant trees for you.
Oh, really?
Right? Or they will do something green.
Virtue signalling.
Yeah, some virtue signalling thing, and which will absolve you, my son, of your fucking expensive flight to to China, wherever it is you're going, jetting around the world, extolling the virtues of green living. So you can carbon offset. So for me, I think, well, I tell you what, why don't we all drive more cars, take more flights, burn more mattresses in our back garden so that we can do even more carbon offsetting? How great would that be,
Yay.
So either these things are bad and we should stop doing them, or just shut the fuck up, So anyway, so we've got this bizarre situation where the taxes for flying, and now they find that, well, the tourism industry's suffering from that, so they say.
Right.
And now we should cut the tax on the flights to encourage people to fly more.
So did they not think ahead and,
Well,
imagine...
this is government they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that seems super obvious.
Yeah.
If you tax something, you get less of it because you're discouraging it. Because the whole point was to discourage it.
Absolutely.
And it worked to that extent in discouraging people. And now they're like, oh, whoops, maybe we shouldn't have discouraged people from flying.
Well, this is if it's true that's why. I mean, there could be all sorts of, correlation is not necessarily causality, right?
Yeah.
Causation, yeah, sorry. But is it causation or causality?
Both work.
Okay, I'll go for causation.
The expression is correlation is not causation.
Is it?
I'm pretty sure.
Says who?
Me. Let's Google it.
Controversial. I will not be contradicted on this show. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go for correlation is not necessarily causality. This sounds better to me. But
correlation is not causation.
Is it?
Top 4 hits. Yeah.
Fuck you, man.
It's Latin, so...
It's Latin?
Yeah, it's Latin.
I didn't know I could speak Latin, but there you go.
Okay.
So anyway, let's get back on track here. So they're talking. They're seriously considering cutting air tax. I'm not saying cutting air tax is a bad thing. I just don't know why it's there in the first place.
And why is it only by 50%?
Yeah.
Why are they just getting half?
At what point who works out at what point it's going to help the industry?
Is it a bad idea or not?
Well, look, is flying a bad idea? If it is, look, guys, if aircraft are killing the planet, then it's got to fucking stop now.
It's just such a ridiculous thing to say. How the hell could aircraft be killing the planet?
Well, they can't. Don't you know it's Gaia, right? This is Gaia. Mother Gaia is actually a living organism, right? It lives, it breathes. It's even got a wee personality of its own, right? So it's a load of Gaia worshipping bollocks, right? It really is. It's the mother. It's for too long, the patriarchy's been all patriarchal and everything's all, God's masculine and everybody's God's masculine. There's not enough goddesses. So the ultimate motherfucker, right? The ultimate mother goddess is this planet that we all share, and we all drink from the tit of Mother Gaia. So look, I'm not saying it's a good idea to pollute things. It's a bad idea, and I like greenery and I like green stuff and I like the environment and I like little animals and things jumping around.
That's an interesting sort of thought experiment. Is so presumably you would deal with.
I like
pollutants.
Clean water.
Yeah, you like clean water. You like clean air. So you deal with polluting other people's private air.
Yeah.
So air is one of those things that's like inherently public. Because even if we're within my home and my neighbour's through there, but if I were to like release some gas here, for example, technically it would go through to his space very quickly because of diffusion laws, and that's physics, right?
Yeah.
So then should I have to pay reparations to him for letting off this gas, assuming it damages his property?
If it does damage his property and it can be proved that it damages his property and him, then I guess so.
So that's how you deal with carbon dioxide emissions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, apparently it was the case that back in the day, I'm saying back in the day, way before my time, and it's hard to believe, that you could sue a factory or an industry, if you hung out washing and the factory pumped out smoke and it blackened your washing.
Oh, like coal burning smoke.
Yeah. You could take the factory to court and sue it to get your washing cleaned, right? Or and foot the bill,
Right.
But a utilitarian argument stepped in and said, look, you selfish little fucking individual, all you care about is your poxy washing. Don't you understand that this factory employs people, it creates jobs, and you selfish little individual, the rights of the collective are greater than your rights, and so therefore stop taking the factories to court. So they put the kibosh on that kind of thing. So that's, and farmers were able to sue when the railroads started in America. Farmers, when the sparks came out of the funnels of locomotives and set fire to crops or set fire to haystacks, farmers were able to sue through the court the railroads for damaging their crops, and that incentivized actually the railroads to put mesh over the top of the funnels to stop sparks from flying out it. So when you could sue that, but then government actually helped corporations and big industrial companies, helped them to get their own way against the small guy who was trying to sort of recompense themselves against this kind of bullshit.
Right.
So government creates legislation, then helps corporations find ways round about it.
Hold on a second. Then
what government does is it introduces one sort of tax, like what it's done with this air tax. So it's introduced that.
What I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Now, so really what the government is doing.
Thanks for interrupting there, because there was no idea where it was going with that.
Sorry. But
it happens.
So what the government's actually doing is saying to companies that pollute. Companies that
they're complacent in polluting, so they've completed.
Yeah. So companies that are polluting by flying these airplanes, the government is saying people don't really like that. So you give us a wee bit of your profits, and on you go, mate.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens.
Because they're not actually paying damages to the people that
they don't
negatively affecting.
Yeah.
And presumably
in most cases, yeah.
So presumably because it's not measurable. Because if you could measure the damage, like your farm burning down, or your farmland being destroyed, then you would be able to actually sue.
Yeah. Well, if you can't measure it, how do they know that it's happening? Yeah.
Which is exactly my point. Yeah.
But it just seems to me that government does one thing, it introduces a tax on the one hand and then does something completely opposite on the other.
Because people like going on holiday.
Yeah, apparently that's what Nicola Sturgeon said. Well, people like going on holiday. I'm sorry, that's not a moral argument. You may be right, but it's not a moral argument.
It's not even really relevant.
It's a bit like saying, what about this slavery? It's pretty bad. Do we get rid of it or what? No, people like cotton. They like wearing it. So let's just keep it. What the hey? Get rid of slavery. Are you mad? Who's going to pick the cotton? Who's going to? If we free Uncle Remus, who's going to read your kids a bedtime story at night? So governments constantly. So it's not a moral argument. It's either air flight and air travel is destroying the planet, or it's not. And if it's destroying the planet, stop it now. I got into trouble. I used to work for a car company, and there's a lot
Are you advocating air tax?
No. All I'm saying is, right, why be hypocritical, right? If it's really that bad for the planet, stop it. It's far too important, right? Just stop doing it. Don't encourage it to continue, and then tax it. What's the point of that? It's either bad for you or it isn't. If it's bad for you, just stop it. And if you're a greeno out there and you think that air travel's bad, don't feckin' do it. It's really that simple.
Hold on, I get it now. Right, so they introduced this tax thinking they would make loads of money skimming off the top of these companies. Yeah. And what happened is fewer people flew because of the tax. And they're like, wait, but we were going to tax some money from you. Yeah. So now they have to reduce the tax because they need to find the right price so that they can cream the most off the top.
Yeah. I mean, they tell you that fossil fuels are killing the planet, right? Maybe they are, I don't know. I haven't seen direct evidence, conclusive evidence that that's happening. But let's say we just take the worst case scenario thing and say, well, let's get rid of it anyway, just because it's too risky. Where was I going with that? Yeah, I used to work for a car company, and they arm wave and they do platitudes. In every advert they put out is about how green their car is and how green's important and blah 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 blah. And you go, look, see if it's that important. See if it's killing it. Stop your production line right fucking now. Immediately. Get into your showroom and tell all those salesmen to stop selling cars, because it's actually killing the planet. It's too fucking important, right? It's far too important. So let's stop the charade, right? And it is a fucking charade. It's just a way of government making more money. As far as I'm concerned, so there shouldn't be a tax on air travel to start. As far as I'm concerned,
I would call it guilt-stortion.
Yeah,
it's extorting.
I mean, because I think you pay an air travel tax. I think that's on top of normal airport taxes that you would pay anyway.
Right. And the only reason they can get away with it is because we feel guilty about killing the planet. When in reality, we might be, but it's not measurable. Because if it were, people would stop.
Yeah, right. But the hypocrisy of government.
It wouldn't be profitable anymore if you could measure the damage, and the damage was too expensive for the airline companies to cover. It wouldn't happen anymore.
Well, this is another thing. Government behave in a completely contradictory fashion. They'll tell you that fossil fuels are damaging the planet, and yet then they'll subsidise diesel for farmers. Right, and they'll subsidise diesel for road freight, road transport is subsidised. Here in Scotland, road travel, public road travel, coaches and buses subsidised. Well, why are we doing that if it's really damaging? So government behaves in a totally contradictory fashion. They want you to buy a car because they don't want people who make cars to go unemployed. So they want you to buy a car. They want you to fuel your car. In fact, even buy two cars. They want you to insure it and tax it, and then don't drive it, basically, or drive it and pay lots of tax for driving it. So it's like, man, it's the fucking bullshit that piles up so high, you need wings to stay above it. So it's, I don't know about if it's killing the planet, but it's killing Darren.
It is slowly killing me.
Okay, moving on to housing. UK government has announced it's putting a white paper. I don't know actually what a white paper does, but anyway, they're producing a white paper.
It's just a blank piece of white paper.
Red. They said we're going to run round the road to fucking what do you call that? Staples. Yeah, run round to Staples and get some white paper.
And that's where we're going to put our plan. Apparently, that's the criticism of it. Apparently, the plan is to make a plan.
Okay, the plans. So that I see, right? So they're not going to actually build whatever it is, 150,000 houses. They're just going to
figure out how.
They're going to figure out how to. I've got an idea. Instead of the government trying to figure out how to build houses, there's these people out there, right? They're called builders, and what they do is they build houses, and they'll build as many houses as you want them to, as long as you pay them. So why not get the fuck out of their faces and out of their way, and just let them get on with what it is they do, which is build houses. Get rid of planning laws, get rid of zoning laws or whatever we call them in this country, and just let builders build. And in fairness, I'm not against building more houses. We definitely do need more houses, or do we? Here's the thing. Here's a strange thing. I know that when I was in the housing market, when I was married, we found it extremely difficult to sell. First of all, my first flat was about 15 grand, if you can believe that, which is less than what you'd pay for a car nowadays.
This sort of size, or
no, it was reasonably sized, old build. It was a granite building. Big living room, big bedroom, hallway, a kitchen. 15 grand. And when it came to selling it, we had trouble selling it and had to rent it out for a while. And part of the reason we had trouble selling it is people were interested in it, but the banks would not give out a loan, especially to first-time buyers on an older build. Whereas the banks and the builders and the councils were all in collusion together for people to buy brand new houses, as opposed to buying older houses that were on the market that frankly were much better quality. They go, the subsiding. Now the whole of Lanarkshire, where I used to live, is frankly subsiding because of the amount of mines that are underneath there. It's all subsiding, but it's not. The house had been up there for over 100 years. It wasn't going to fall down. But you've got subsidence, so you can't. We're not going to give out a loan on this mortgage, even though it's a cheaper mortgage than the new. It's a cheaper house than the new build.
Right.
We're not going to give out loans in that. So there's this collusion going on, and every week you would look in the newspaper, and you would find houses that had been on the market for months and months and months, and the same houses, and people couldn't sell them. Perfectly good houses, and people couldn't sell them because banks would not give loans to first-time buyers and wouldn't even give out loans to any buyer because this collusion between banks and building companies and the councils were going on as well, because the councils were raking in money from selling off council land, selling off greenbelt land, and raking in the money,
Right.
So all that stuff was going on. So I don't know if the housing shortage is down to, do we really need to build more houses, or do we just need to, do you know what? Let the market do it.
Yeah.
That's the fucking solution. Let the market do it. Certainly there's people who need housing, and as we discovered, what were we looking at earlier?
So we'll take a look at a couple of graphs. Excuse me. We will take.
I love a graph.
We'll take a look at a couple of. I'm a graphs man. I like graphs. So
Darren's got a boner for graphs.
I do have a massive boner for graphs.
I don't know about massive, but carry.
The number of homes. The number of homes built in the country since the 60s has actually gone down steadily. So
right.
And especially housing associations and local authorities building houses in the 70s. There was 100,000 a year being built, where and overall 300,000 houses a year being built.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays it's more like 100,000, 150,000, 120,000
right. Okay.
a year, something like that. But if you compare that to the population growth, So population growth has been going exponential because birth rates are going up and death rates are going down.
So I accept that death rates are going down. I accept that, but I cannot accept that in this country that birth rate is going up. Surely not.
Yeah, birth rate's going up. Well,
according to these figures.
According to these figures, yeah. So, I mean, I assume it's not here in Scotland because we don't tend to see that. But in places like London,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah. London population's going up, right?
Yeah.
So anyway,
but apparently there's a housing crisis.
Yeah. Well, it explains why house pricing is going up so fast in London because everyone's desperate to get a house. But anyway, so yeah, people are not shuffling off.
Yeah.
And because of that, only about 90,000 people a year are downsizing. So this is like parents whose children have
flown the coop.
Yeah, flown the coop, and they have a 5-bedroom house. And there's just 1 or 2 individuals in that house now.
Okay.
That not a lot of them are actually moving out. So there's an estimated £835 billion worth of housing equity caught up in about 3 million houses in the country.
Right.
With over 65-year-olds that are not moving out of these houses to free them up for large families.
So it's like a housing form of bed blocking, really.
Right.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I mean, they're entitled to live in a 6-bedroom house on their own if they want.
Whatever they want.
Yeah, if they own it. But for me, it just seems strange. Okay, if you listen to certain quarters, and I'm sure they're right, there's a housing crisis. But again, this is where government hypocrisy comes in. The last Labour government was brought down apparently because housing prices dropped. I'm sure there was all sorts of other factors as well, but that's one of the reasons it's often cited.
Now, I remember you said, "Thou shalt not let house prices."
Thou shalt not let house prices drop. So if you build more and more houses, then that means that there's more supply and demand drop because there's more and more houses getting built. So that the price of them comes down, or at least stays static. So
which explains why they stopped doing that, right?
Yeah, exactly, because they're trying to, engineer the whole thing to keep property prices artificially high.
Yeah.
And if you're out there, if you're a property owner, unless you are prepared to see the price of your property drop, you have got no right to talk about homelessness, and you've got no right to talk about a housing crisis unless you are prepared to watch the price of your property drop by a third. Or at very least stay static.
I mean, it's 50 times what it was back when. I mean, back in the 60s, the late 60s. Yeah, it's about 50 times as expensive nowadays.
Yeah.
To buy a house.
To buy a house. Yeah, it's because there's a lack of, and this is another one that gets you affordable housing. Yeah, we're going to build affordable housing. Really, affordable to who? It's not affordable to me. You go like, 120 grand? That's an affordable house, is it? So instead of just, get friggin' planning laws. I mean, there's a lot of people. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would just love to build their own house, but you can't even do that without planning laws and planning permission.
Yeah. It'll just get taken away or destroyed. There's stories of people who've built tiny houses in the UK. And they're like, no, it gets scrapped. You're not allowed to do that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's insane. It's not just insane, it's evil.
That might lower the price of housing.
Yeah, of course it will,
And we can't have that.
Housing is housing. Is it better that somebody lives in a house that you might deem is too small for them than not live in a house at all? Which one of those two is better, you idiot?
You'd be much safer than living on the streets, definitely.
Yeah, and in terms of homelessness, I mean, let's try to inject a bit of sensibility here. There is far more to homelessness than just not having a house. There's all sorts of issues surrounding homelessness other than just not having a house.
Yeah.
I guess there's people out there who will always be homeless for I guess. I mean, I've heard that and I'm sure it's true. There's certain people who have been housed and they just can't handle it. It's like a mental issue that they can't handle and they go back to life on the streets.
Right.
But there's so many ways of handling this issue, but whatever it is, I'm sure the solution is not government housing.
No.
But I reckon the people say, look, post-war, Government built lots and lots of houses for rent, cheap, low cost rent. I'm saying low cost. It was low cost to the people who went into them, but the cost of building them wasn't necessarily low cost.
Right, it was socialised.
Yeah, socialised housing.
So one thing I did this week was at the SEC there was the country caravan show.
Wow, it sounds like a hoot.
I went because I was filming it, but I did have some personal interest as well, because I've often thought
of getting a caravan.
how do I avoid paying extortionate amounts of money for a home via a mortgage? I don't want debt slavery. I would much rather just build my own small place. Yeah. And that sort of made me think,
live in a caravan, live in a houseboat, canal boat, whatever.
Yeah, canal boat. There's a guy who lives in a canal boat next to my work, and but
you know what? The government will eventually get you on your canal boat. And they'll find we've got all these utter bastards living environmentally friendly lives on canal boats, and they're not paying enough tax. You know, we have to find a way of getting them off those canal boats and buying the crappy houses, the crappy new build houses that we're building at extortionate prices. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, I interrupted you there.
Well, absolutely. I mean, what I found was even these caravans, even the smallest ones, I mean, of the affordable thing, it's just like, it's still like way more expensive than it needs to be.
Give us a for instance.
It's like the smallest one, like the size of a car roughly. Right. The bed at the top, you're talking like 20 grand.
Right.
Still.
Okay. So that's more expensive than my first flat. Right. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. So it's like, well, as absolute push, I might be able to save up and buy a caravan and then live in it. But then it's just like that's literally at a push, and I'm getting on the lowest rung of the ladder. So I think that there was one section in the marquee that was just inflatable tents, and I think you would literally have to go that low on the market side for it to be realistic for say a minimum wage 9 to 5 job to be able to actually buy a house. You're talking about a fucking inflatable tent.
An inflatable tent.
Yay! And even then, it's a couple of grand, right?
Can't somebody just
come along
and
it falls on someone's head?
A big drawing pin and go, and that's your big fucking inflatable house fucked.
Which presumably is why they're 5 grand, because they have to pass all the regulations for non-puncturability.
Oh, for God's sake!
So that it doesn't fall down on your children and suffocate them or whatever.
So again, they'd be living in this sort of inflatable house, beds. Time you got up to bed with your cup of Horlicks, it'd be all over the shop, What the fuck am I on about?
I should explain. It's not like a bouncy castle. It's like instead of,
for that,
you know, the sort of foldable bamboo sticks that would always just be a nightmare. I don't know if you've ever set up a tent like that, but you have to pressurize them, and sometimes they snap. Do away with all that and just have inflatable tubes. You just sort of, you shove them through flaccid, and then you inflate, and it sort of erects.
Yeah, well,
I can't think of any better way.
I'm 50-year-old this year, so shoving things through flaccid and getting them to get erect is something I'm getting quite used to. So on that, I think on that note,
nailed it.
Are we done with housing? I mean, let's say, good idea. Build more houses. Let the market do it. See, the problem is, kiddies, whatever the government does, it doesn't have any money. The only money it can get is money that it takes by force from other people. Just give me an example of something that, something that's close to my heart is veterans, okay? So I'm an ex-soldier. So, there's a problem with homelessness with veterans, there's a problem with suicide with veterans. And a lot of guys who know I'm in politics go, okay, what would you do for veterans when you're in? Well, I go, well, anything I can to make their life more livable and to help them. But the problem is, and if anybody should get money from government, it should be veterans, right? Because they went on behalf of the government to foreign climes to kill people and be shot at and get gassed, or whatever else happened to them. So you'd think, if anybody should get handed from the government, it's veterans.
So, correction, if anyone should receive charity, voluntarily it should be veterans.
Well, not necessarily, right? Because
Okay,
here's the point I'm going to make, right? You could argue that they should get government money because it's the government that sent them to do the job. However, and they're government employees at the end of the day. But the fact of the matter is the government doesn't have any money. It can only get money by taxing.
Yeah.
And there are people out there who will quite rightly say, hang on a minute, these soldiers were not conscripts. Most of them are volunteers. In fact, all of them in the UK are volunteers. They're professional soldiers. That was their job. That was their living. And as much as I have compassion, I care more about the victims of war than I do. I was against these wars. I was against it. I didn't send them. They were sent to Iraq, they were sent to Afghanistan, and they were sent to these places not in my name. Why should I be forced to pay for that? Even when it comes to veterans. And I completely get that. I really do. So, and that's the problem when it comes to anything that the government does. Somebody who doesn't agree with it is forced to pay for it. And we were just talking earlier how it's weird. Steve and I were talking the way over here. When you talk to the left about the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, and they talk about Trident, even Jeremy Corbyn said, we should be able to opt out of paying for Trident. They absolutely get it. They get taxation. They get why you shouldn't be forced to pay for things you disagree with. Until it comes to things that they agree with, and then suddenly, you should be able to use force to gather revenue things you agree with. When you talk to people on the right, there's loads of things that they go, absolutely, shouldn't be paying tax for that, shouldn't be paying tax for welfare, shouldn't be paying tax for handouts to people who are feckless. And you go, well, okay, but you do agree with taxing people for corporate handouts and for welfare and for fighting wars and for fighting defence.
Yeah.
So both of you guys on the left and on the right actually get it in your own sphere, right? I shouldn't be forced. This guy says I shouldn't be forced to pay for this guy's projects, and these people over on the right are saying, well, I shouldn't be forced to pay for those guys' projects. Guys, when will you ever get it? Nobody should be forced to pay for anybody else's pet projects. Taxation is theft, and the only way you can do it is with the threat of menaces, and it has to stop.
Right on.
So, until next time, don't be a dick.
Or a fanny.
Be a libertarian.
If you want more Scottish Liberty podcasts, remember to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or SoundCloud.